In the middle of the previous century, flying saucers were constantly making headlines. America was going through a surge of reported UFO sightings. So it shouldn't probably come as a surprise that the American authorities, namely the US Air Force, created a couple of short-lived programs. Those were Project Sign and Project Grudge, and their main goal was to look into that phenomenon. These programs were followed by likely the most famous of them all, Project Blue Book. It was a large-scale government study that lasted from 1951 to 1969. The initiator of this program was Major General Charles P. Cabell. He was a former intelligence director of the Air Force. Project Blue Book scrupulously gathered over 12,600 reports about people seeing bizarre, unidentified objects in the sky. After thorough research, it was determined that most of those had natural, quite mundane explanations. As for the rest of the reports, the members of Project Blue Book simply didn't have enough data to evaluate them. That's why support for their efforts dwindled. Officially, Project Blue Book was closed in December 1969. But apparently, it didn't make American authorities lose interest in UFO sightings. Because in mid-December 2017, the world found out that they had secretly launched one more UFO research program in the late 2000s. Accordingly to certain documents, American authorities spent around $22 million over a 4-year span on a project called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, aka AATIP. This project was started in 2007, and its main goal was to study UFO phenomena. Most likely, all this activity was triggered by the 2004 Tic Tac incident. That's when a few US Air Force pilots spotted unidentified flying objects off the coast of California. They captured them on video. None of the pilots could figure out what these objects were. They behaved in a weird way, as if our laws of physics didn't apply to them. They were reportedly flying extremely fast and rotating in unpredictable movements. It looks as if after that incident, American authorities decided to investigate whether those objects could be identified or not. And if not, they were eager to know where they had come from and if they had been a threat. When the New York Times story about the new project broke, officials announced that the study had been terminated in 2012. However, there were people who claimed that the program was still ongoing. One of those was a military intelligence official running the program until they quit in October 2016. In any case, let's have a closer look at this mysterious program. Indeed, the areas of research funded by the project resembled things you could find in Star Trek. For example, one grant was for the study of traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. This study was conducted by Eric W. Davis of EarthTech International, Inc. Another grant sponsored the research of invisibility cloaking. One more area of study included warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. This research was conducted by a theoretical physicist and director of the nonprofit Icarus Interstellar. As we've already mentioned, all these studies received at least $22 million of funding, but this sum could have been much bigger. No one has revealed why or how these studies were given such huge grants under the AATI program. The results of the study aren't known publicly either. The criteria for choosing these fields of research could be that warp drives and stargates might be useful for extraterrestrial civilizations traveling interstellar distances to visit our planet. Still, some people are not amused that such questionable fields of study were receiving substantial government funding.
Hi, my name is Martin. I am the author of this channel, and today I'll tell you all about the evidence of astronauts meeting with unidentified things at the time of observation. It's the year 1962, and American John Glenn is orbiting Earth in his Friendship 7 capsule on the Mercury Atlas 6 flight. He looks out of the window and sees fireflies.
Well, maybe those are not fireflies, but he clearly sees some weird bright specks clustered around the ship. Unsurprisingly, he tries to find a logical explanation. Can they be ice crystals from the spacecraft's hydrogen peroxide attitude control rockets? But Glenn is unable to correlate their appearance with the use of the rockets. The mystery remains unsolved.
Only much later will we find out what those fireflies were. You see, spaceships tend to accumulate clouds of debris and contamination around themselves. And when Glenn's rockets sprayed jets of crystals, many of these crystals accumulated in the cloud. They reflected sunlight and interacted with other gases, looking like tiny sparkles. The case of the mysterious fireflies is now officially solved.
But it isn't the darkest space tale. One of the most famous cases of seeing bizarre stuff in space comes from Apollo 11. That's when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins noticed a UFO pacing along with them during their flight to the moon. That's how the astronauts described this incident. We did watch a slow blinking light some substantial distance away from us. There was something out there, close enough to be observed. The period of uncertainty was rather brief. The astronauts and ground control soon identified the object. It was one of the 4 adapter panels that fit between the 3rd stage and the lunar module. These panels were ejected from the 3rd stage, and one of them continued along the same trajectory as the lunar module with the crew. While moving, it rotated and blinked when sunlight was reflected off its surface.
Another famous and truly creepy picture hinting at the presence of alien life on the moon was taken by the crew of Apollo 16.
As the astronauts were leaving our natural satellite, they made a video, and 4 seconds of it showed a near-perfect Hollywood flying saucer leaving behind a plasma trail. For more than 30 years, enthusiasts used this video to prove that aliens had paid us a visit.
But then, scientists decided to take the matter into their own hands. They realized that, when viewed from the window through which the video had been taken, the object in the film was actually consistent with a small floodlight sticking out from the side of the capsule on a boom.
Look, from this angle, the floodlight looks exactly like a flying saucer. And the boom, indeed, looks like that plasma trail. And do you see this? Those are a couple of bolts on the boom.
Another report that inspired UFO enthusiasts came from Gemini 7. Astronauts Frank Borman and Jim Lovell were making what was called a football maneuver. It was supposed to get them into a position where they would make recurring close approaches with their Titan II booster stage every orbit.
But when they were performing this maneuver, Barman reported bogey at 10 o'clock high. We have several, looks like debris, up here, actual sighting. We also have the booster in sight. Yeah, have very, very many. Look like hundreds of little particles banked on the left out about 3 to 4 miles. It looks like a path to the vehicle at 90 degrees. They are past now. They were in polar orbit. Lovell claimed that the booster was in sight too, slowly tumbling along with the debris cloud. Does it mean that Bogman's bogey particles couldn't have been the booster or booster debris? After all, they were moving in a different direction, traveling along a different trajectory. Well, not necessarily. Later analysis showed that those particles were ice flakes from leftover fuel from the Titan II.
As you see, astronauts often report seeing weird stuff out there, but NASA's reaction is often anticlimactic. Let's have a look at how they commented on the statements of an astronaut who claimed to have witnessed alien presence in space.
NASA doesn't track UFOs. NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up of alien life on this planet or anywhere else in the universe.
We should also remember that unidentify doesn't necessarily mean positively identify as an alien spacecraft. There's a lot of objects in orbit, and a lot of stuff travels along every mission. So, we'll always have UFO reports as long as we have space programs.
The Roswell incident is a collection of events and myths surrounding the crash of a mysterious object in 1947. Right after rubber and metallic debris was recovered by Roswell Army airfield staff, the United States Army claimed that they had their hands on a flying disc. Just a day after this announcement was made and made international headlines, it was retracted, but the word was already out. To hide the true nature of the find, the Army stated it was a good old weather balloon. But later in 1978, a retired Air Force officer revealed that it was just a cover story. At the same time, he added that he was sure that the debris had an extraterrestrial origin. This speculation became popular thanks to the 1980 book, The Roswell Incident. It also turned into the basis for long-lasting and increasingly contradictory and complex UFO conspiracy theories. Over time, they expanded the incident to include authorities hiding the evidence of other space civilizations, multiple crashed flying saucers, alien bodies, and even reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology. However, none of those theories were based on any real evidence. But despite the absence of proof, many supporters of the UFO theory claimed that the Roswell debris was from a crashed alien craft. They accused the authorities of creating cover-up stories. This conspiracy narrative became a trope in movies, science fiction literature, and TV shows. No wonder that the town of Roswell is still promoting itself as the best destination for UFO-associated tourism. But what happened in this area in reality? The government's claim that a weather balloon had crashed at Roswell was indeed a lie. In 1994, the Air Force admitted that the recovered debris had actually been from an American balloon used to watch other nations. It was part of Project Mogul, an attempt to monitor anticipated nuclear tests that could be conducted by other countries. In 1997, an Air Force report called the Roswell Report, Case Closed, suggested that all those stories about alien bodies could have come from civilian witnesses who had seen parachute crash test dummies. The report also suggested that the witnesses might have combined several different events in their memories: the Project Mogul materials, the crash of test dummies, and a few other accidents that had occurred in the area. For many supporters of the UFO theory, though, those explanations sounded like the authorities planned to cover up their interaction with extraterrestrial civilizations. After all, in 1947, the USA, as well as some other nations, was in the midst of the flying saucer craze. People reported seeing bizarre objects in the sky. They claimed those were spacecraft piloted by aliens. It was against such a hectic background that a rancher discovered some highly unusual debris near Roswell, New Mexico. The material included tinfoil, sticks, and rubber strips. The next month, he took his findings to the Roswell sheriff. The man contacted the Roswell Army Airfield. After getting the wreckage, they issued that very extraordinary press release claiming that a flying disc had been found at a local ranch. The reasons for such an outrageous statement were unclear. In any case, the Roswell Daily Record picked up this press release right away, printing the story on the 8th of July with the headline, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." That's when the military backtracked, announcing that it had been just a weather balloon carrying a radar target. That's a device that looks like a box kite made of foiled paper fastened to a balsa wood frame. The Roswell Morning Dispatch paid attention to this new claim and released a new story called "Army Debunks Roswell Flying Disc as World Simmers with Excitement."
It was the year 1952 when America first caught the flying saucer fever. A rash of strange sightings was reported in the skies over Washington, D.C. Were those unexplained radar blips, unidentified aircraft, or something much more outlandish? The Washington, D.C. sightings of the summer 1952 are also known as the Big Flap. But it all started in 1947 when a search and rescue pilot reported 9 saucer-like things flying like geese in a diagonal chain-like line. Their speed reportedly exceeded 1,000 miles per hour. Within mere weeks, the sightings of flying saucers were reported in 40 other states. Later, the explanations were found. The sightings were either hoaxes or misidentifications of known aircraft and natural phenomena, but a few cases remained unexplained. By 1952, the UFO investigation unit called Project Blue Book had been founded. It was led by Captain Edward Rubbold. He and his team would have continued to investigate a few dozen sightings per month, but for the April 1952 issue of Life magazine with an eye-catching headline, "There is a case for interplanetary saucers." The article made quite a convincing case. It spoke about 10 unexplained UFO incidents, claiming that the flying objects were extraterrestrial in origin. According to the Washington Post, after the appearance of the article, the number of UFO sightings grew more than sixfold, from 23 in March 1952 to 148 in June. By July, the UFO mania was in full swing. All that was missing was a spark. And it happened before midnight on Saturday, July 19th, 1952. An air traffic controller at Washington National Airport spotted 7 slow-moving objects on his radar screen. They were far from any civilian or military flight paths. He called his supervisor and joked about a fleet of flying saucers. Simultaneously, 2 other air traffic controllers at National spotted a bizarre bright light hovering in the distance. It suddenly dashed away at breakneck speed. At Andrews Air Force Base, located nearby, radar operators detected the same unidentified blips. Those were slow and clustered at first, but then they raced away at a speed higher than 7,000 miles per hour. One Andrews controller looked out of his tower window and spotted something he later described as an orange ball of fire with a tail. A commercial pilot flying over the Virginia and Washington, D.C. area saw 6 streaking bright lights resembling falling stars without tails. 2 jets were sent to search for the UFOs, but every time they got close to the locations shown on the radar screens, the weird blips would disappear. By dawn of July 20th, the objects were gone altogether. Ruppelt, the lead investigator of Project Blue Book, found out about the sightings just a few days later after flying to Washington, D.C. and reading news reports. He tried to get to National and Andrews to interview the radar operators and air traffic controllers, but wasn't allowed to take a government-issued car. He had to fly back to Ohio with nothing. In a few days, UFOs were back over the Capitol. The same radar blips appeared again. Radar operators were wondering whether those dozen or so objects could be caused by a temperature inversion. That's a common occurrence in DC's muggy, scorching summer months. It occurs when a layer of warm air forms in the low atmosphere. It traps cooler air beneath. In this case, radar signals can bounce off the layer at shallow angles and create an impression of near-ground objects in the sky. To be safe, 2 more aircraft were sent to chase down the unidentified targets. The jets raced to a location targeted by radar, only for the blips to disappear. Eventually, one of the plane pilots saw a bright light in the distance and gave chase. But even though he was flying at maximum speed, he didn't manage to overtake the lights. At a press conference, representatives of the Air Force offered the public some easy-to-swallow explanations, having opted for the temperature inversion theory. After that, UFO sightings dropped from 50 a day to 10.
If alien life exists, it may be way stranger than we can imagine. For some inexplicable reason, we've long assumed that aliens might be like us humans. But in reality, they're more likely to be some form of unfathomable AI. With dozens of billions of years of evolution, intelligence can develop in entirely new, unexpected directions. Humans might be near the end of Darwinian evolution. We no longer need to remain the fittest to survive. But the technological evolution of AI minds is just starting. Who knows, maybe in another century or two, we'll be overtaken by inorganic intelligence. So, the question is, are aliens more likely to be flesh and blood, like us, or are they something more artificial? Even though many believe that people are at the peak of intelligence, it's possible that our species may just represent a stage on the way toward more artificial and advanced minds. And it can actually explain why space seems to be empty of similar forms of life. Perhaps an evolutionary transition to non-organic intelligence is inevitable all over the universe. Then aliens could be electronic descendants of once organic creatures that existed long, long ago. Such an idea gives us some exciting possibilities. If AI aliens were out there, they would act and think totally differently from us. Plus, they might not want to be detected. Non-organic intelligence may not need an atmosphere, so they might have already left their home planet. If they didn't need any special conditions, they would be able to make intergalactic voyages without having to fear for their lives. They could prefer to live in zero gravity because, in such conditions, you can build very large and very lightweight structures. For example, if you wanted to construct a giant gossamer-thin structure to harvest energy, it would be easier to do so in space than on a planet. They might not even need to live in orbit around a star. They could have innovative ways of getting energy we can't imagine yet. If their brains were silicon-based, they could realize that they needed less energy to process information at lower temperatures. So, they would move away from planetary systems to colder regions of the cosmos. They could even have periods of hibernation for billions of years. What if they had such a period waiting until the cosmic microwave background, the leftover radiation after the Big Bang, cooled down enough for them to function properly? We can't assume that these aliens would be a civilization either. On Earth, this term means a society of individuals. But aliens might be a single integrated intelligence, or they might be zombies, super intelligent but lacking self-awareness and inner life. In this case, they would be alive but unable to perceive themselves or the world around them. Alternatively, their advanced intelligence might allow them to understand aspects of reality we can't figure out yet. There are likely to be things in the universe that neither our mind nor our senses can grasp. But electronic brains might have a very different perception. Interestingly, these days, humans themselves are starting to use AI to detect alien life out there. After all, there are between 10 and 50 billion potentially habitable worlds in our galaxy alone, and looking for intelligent life is a hard task without some assistance. That's when the US-based research organization, SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, comes into play. This institute is looking for science and technology beyond the solar system. It could be evidence of intelligence out there. But it's a needle in a haystack kind of situation. Luckily, new instruments are helping the search. Artificial intelligence can both handle massive datasets and spot anomalies, which is transforming the hunt for alien intelligence. SETI, together with other research organizations, built an AI-powered software system called the Very Large Array. It consists of 28 large dish antennas spread across a desert plain. When it starts working, the AI will be able to process 2 terabytes of data every second. For comparison, modern laptops typically have around 1 terabyte of total storage. So, hopefully, these new tools will provide us with new, groundbreaking discoveries. According to the theory of panspermia, life could have been brought to Earth by a meteorite, comet, or asteroid from a different region of space. At the moment, this idea remains purely theoretical. But let's figure out if it could actually turn out to be true. Traditionally, exobiologists, those who are focused on searching for life outside Earth, have been trying to explore the possibility of life on Mars or in the subsurface oceans of Saturn's and Jupiter's icy moons. But simple life could be much more widespread. It could be drifting through interplanetary space right now, in the form of dormant bacteria and spores. Several scientists have noted that the ultra-harsh environment of space is likely to severely damage the DNA and RNA of such spores and microorganisms. Others believe that since enough microbes could be traveling in a dust cloud, some of them could survive in their original form. There are several types of panspermia. For example, lithopanspermia proposes that some kind of microbic life could exist in debris blasted into the cosmos after planetary collisions with comets and asteroids. Radiopanspermia claims that organisms might be able to travel through space with the help of radiation coming from stars. But in this case, it's unclear how the effect of dangerous ultraviolet and X-ray radiation, combined with the vacuum of space, doesn't totally destroy microorganisms. There's also pseudopanspermia. According to it, organic building blocks of life appear in interstellar clouds of dust. they get transported to the surfaces of planets, and life starts developing there. It sounds really fascinating, but is there any evidence for the panspermia theory? Well, there have been a few orbital experiments. For example, from 2008 to 2016, the samples gathered by EXPOSE, special equipment mounted outside the International Space Station and dedicated to astrobiology, were exposed to the conditions of space. After that, they were returned to Earth from the ISS. It turned out that some of them had survived those severe conditions. There was even a case when 100% of bacterial spores placed in Mars-like conditions were still capable of life. Also, some seeds survived and were later grown as plants on Earth. There have also been exostack experiments on the U.S. Long-Duration Exposure Facility satellite and biopan experiments on Russian photon capsules. They have shown that with minimal protection, spores, lichens, and even minuscule animals, such as tardigrades, might be able to survive in space for as long as several years. A piece of Surveyor 3 lunar lander was brought back to Earth in 1969 by the Apollo 12 mission. Shockingly, it contained an Earth bacterium that had survived unprotected for more than 2 years on the airless surface. At the same time, this bacterium could have come from laboratory contamination on arrival back on Earth. The Indian Space Research Organization carried out a search for space microorganisms too. It was done at stratospheric altitudes via balloon flights. The results showed that living interplanetary cells existed in air samples taken from heights of above 25 miles. Normally, air from lower levels of the atmosphere can't be transported there, so this discovery seemed to prove the theory of panspermia. But in 2010, NASA atmospheric sampling before and after hurricanes proved that under certain circumstances, Earth bacteria could actually be transported very high into the upper levels of the atmosphere. One of the main arguments against panspermia is that if this theory was correct, all life found throughout the solar system would have a common origin and share main biochemical characteristics like genetic code. It doesn't sound plausible. Many specialists believe that only the presence of astronaut explorers on the surfaces of, let's say, Mars, Europa, or Enceladus can properly solve the question of life in the solar system. They can compare any life forms found with Earth-type life, which can turn out to be a real test of panspermia. In any case, until probes finally find direct proof of spaceborne life, the panspermia theory will remain unproven. We could use one of the largest lasers in the world to detect alien spaceships. If aliens existed and managed to make a spacecraft as huge as Jupiter, our equipment could probably detect it using the ripples its warp drives would produce in space-time. You see, an enormous spaceship is bound to produce gravitational waves while moving around. You can read about a warp drive, also called a drive-enabling space warp, in science fiction. This device distorts the shape of the space-time continuum and is one of several ways of traveling through space. It's often described as similar to hyperspace, a faster-than-light method of interstellar travel. A spaceship equipped with a warp drive can travel at speeds greater than the speed of light by many orders of magnitude. But unlike some other fictitious faster-than-light methods of travel, like a jump drive, it doesn't permit immediate transfers between 2 points. Instead, it involves a measurable passage of time. A spacecraft using a warp drive would still keep interacting with objects in normal space, and produce gravitational waves too. That's why, if any extraterrestrial gigantic spacecraft traveled through our galaxy, the Laser Interferometer, Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, in the US might be able to detect it. Its equipment could search for the ripples in the fabric of spacetime left by the spaceship. The bigger an object is, the larger gravitational waves it would leave. Planets, neutron stars, and even black holes produce quite prominent ripples. For the first time, such spacetime ripples were directly detected in 2015. And since then, scientists have been getting better and better at spotting gravitational waves. New calculations published some time ago suggested that LIGO could look beyond conventional sources of spacetime ripples. The authors of the study claimed that colossal alien spacecraft traveling at high speeds, or pushed along by warp drives could also produce the telltale vibrations. The LIGO detector notices gravitational waves from the tiniest distortions they make in space-time when passing through it. The observatory consists of two intersecting L-shaped detectors, each with two arms that are almost 2.5 miles long. They also have two identical laser beams inside. The experiment is designed in such a way that if a gradational wave passes through our planet, the laser light in one arm of the detector gets compressed while the other expands. It creates a minuscule change in the relative path lengths of the beams arriving at the detector. At the same time, the warpings of space-time that even the largest gravitational waves make are barely noticeable. They're often the size of a few thousandths of a proton or neutron. It means that LIGO is incredibly sensitive and requires precise maintenance and calibration. To check how far this sensitivity can stretch, researchers made calculations of the smallest object that would produce clearly detectable gravitational waves on Earth. Apparently, it would still be pretty big. To be detectable by LIGO, an alien spacecraft would need to weigh roughly the same as Jupiter, be within 326,000 light-years away from Earth, and travel at 1/10 the speed of light. Could spaceships of this scale and speed exist? It's unclear, but hopefully, scientists will be able to squeeze down the ship's size to slightly more reasonable proportions thanks to the increasing sensitivity of gravitational wave detectors. For example, in the mid-30s, the European Space Agency's Laser Interferometer space antenna is going to be deployed. Scientists also think that advanced alien warp drives could create a gravitational wave patterns distinguishable from natural sources. If detected, these alien waves could probe at use with answers to how to reverse engineer the technology. All because the shape of the gravitational wave signal is dependent on the trajectory of an object. Once a burst signal is detected, we could attempt to figure out the qualities of the transportation mechanism used there based on the shape of the gravitational wave signal.
One of the biggest questions that has been torturing the minds of astronomers and common folks is, why haven't we found aliens yet? You'd think with a universe so big and filled with tons of stars and planets, we'd have already bumped into some extraterrestrial neighbors by now. This question was first asked by famous physicist Enrico Fermi during a lunch with his fellow scientists. They were chatting about UFO sightings and aliens, and suddenly Fermi asked, "Where is everyone?" It seemed like a casual comment, but it sparked a huge debate. If the universe is packed with stars, planets, and the possibility of alien life, how come we haven't seen any yet? This discussion gave birth to something we now call the Fermi paradox. It goes like this. Based on what we know, there should be advanced alien civilizations out there, perhaps even many of them. They'd likely have technology that could allow them to travel across space or at least send us signals to let us know they're there. But here's the kicker. Despite all of our technology and all the searching we've done, we haven't found a single shred of solid proof that these advanced civilizations do exist. So where are they? Over the years, a lot of theories trying to explain this paradox have seen the light of day. Let's talk about some of the most interesting ones. The rare Earth hypothesis claims that Earth might just be super rare, and planets like ours, with life, are incredibly uncommon. In this case, we could be the only planet in the Milky Way harboring life, or at least intelligent life. We might also be the first intelligent civilization in our galaxy to reach this level of development. In other words, we could be pioneers, however unbelievable it may sound. At the same time, it's not very scientific to rely on a rare chance. Some people think that maybe advanced civilizations were once here, but left the Milky Way. Perhaps they developed the technology of interstellar travel, enabling them to fly between galaxies. Or they could use other exotic ways, like wormholes, hypothetical structures connecting disparate points in space-time. Maybe they found more interesting and pleasant places to live far away from us. One sad possibility is that when a civilization becomes too advanced, it ends up destroying itself. Whether through war, environmental destruction, or something else, it could be that most civilizations don't last long enough to reach out to others. Now, imagine an advanced civilization being wiped out by a disease before they could even start exploring stars. In other words, it's possible that civilizations just don't survive long enough to meet others. Another hypothesis, not very flattering to us. What if these aliens are using technology that we just don't understand? Maybe they're communicating in ways we can't detect, like using signals beyond our current understanding of physics. Scientists are discussing such possibilities, but haven't found any yet. Aliens might also be intentionally avoiding us. They could be out there but staying silent, not so eager to reveal themselves until we're ready. Speaking of being ready, some people think that aliens could be waiting for us to reach a certain level of development before they make contact. Maybe they don't want to interfere with our growth until we're more advanced. Advanced civilizations could also go into virtual realities. And if they can live in digital worlds, they might stop caring about exploring the physical universe. Why bother? Another wild idea is that some civilizations might go into a type of hibernation, waiting for the universe to cool down, because it might be more energy efficient to do so. And last but not least, there's this creepy possibility that our entire universe is a computer simulation, and aliens are hidden from us on purpose. It's something like a video game that doesn't reveal all its secrets at once until you get to the next level. Now let's talk about the odds of life out there. We know that in just our galaxy, the Milky Way, there are probably around 20 billion planets that are roughly Earth-sized and located in the habitable zone, which means they're just the right distance from their stars to have liquid water. But how many of these planets actually have life? Could it be most of them, just a few, or almost none? And out of the planets that do have life, how many host intelligent beings with technology? In the 1960s, a scientist named Dr. Frank Drake tried to estimate the number of civilizations in our galaxy that could contact us. He came up with a famous equation, later called the Drake equation. It looks complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. It helps us calculate the number of intelligent civilizations based on things like how many stars are born each year, how many have planets, how many planets could support life, and how long a civilization might last. Here's what it looks like. Let's look into this equation in more detail. N is the number of intelligent civilizations that could contact us. R is the rate of star formation in our galaxy. FP is the fraction of stars with planets. NE is the average number of planets per star that could support life. FL is the fraction of those planets where life actually develops. Fi is the fraction where intelligent life arises. FC is the fraction of civilizations that can and want to communicate. L is how long these civilizations last before they disappear. The problem is, we don't know the exact values for most of these factors. So when we plug in numbers, which we know with large errors, we get answers with very large errors too. Depending on the values, the number of civilizations in our galaxy could be anywhere from almost 0 to tens of thousands. Right now, the best estimate we can come up with gives us a very small number, close to 0. In other words, even though our galaxy is huge, it's possible we're all alone here. Or nearly alone. One big reason we haven't met any aliens yet is that even if they do exist, we might not be able to visit them, at least not with our current technology. The speed of light is a hard limit in physics, meaning nothing can travel faster than it. This makes interstellar travel super slow. The situation could be better if there were exotic ways of travel, such as wormholes and warp drives. One day, they may turn out to be real, but so far, there is little hope for that. Even if we can't meet aliens face to face, there are still ways we might discover them. One of the biggest projects is called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. SETI scientists use huge telescopes to listen for radio signals from distant planets. If an alien civilization is sending out signals, we might be able to pick them up. And if we have a very powerful telescope, we might use it to take super detailed pictures of distant planets, maybe even Earth-like ones, hundreds of light years away. This could give us a whole new way to search for signs of alien life. In any case, even though we haven't found aliens yet, the search is far from over. Whether it's through new technology, better understanding of physics, or just listening to the stars, we might one day find that we're not alone in the universe. Until then, the question, where is everyone, keeps sparking curiosity. Let me tell you about one of the wildest UFO stories out there. The case of Antonio Villas-Boas, a Brazilian farmer. He claimed he had been abducted by aliens in 1957. He was 23 at the time, working in the fields one night when he saw a strange red light in the sky. That light? According to him, it was an alien spaceship. He said the ship had landed and weird-looking 5-foot-tall aliens grabbed him, took him inside, and covered him in a bizarre, yucky gel. Then, things got even more alarming. Antonio claimed he had been taken to a room where extraterrestrials had taken samples of his blood, and then he had been left alone with a female alien. According to Antonio, she had white hair, red body hair, and cat-like blue eyes. Afterward, she pointed upward. The man thought that she meant she'd have their child in space. The aliens then gave Antonio a quick tour of their ship. But when he tried to take a souvenir, they stopped him. After about 4 hours or so, the man was released and could observe the spaceship fly away. Interestingly, Antonio stuck to his story throughout his whole life. Some people are sure that he made it all up, while others believe the encounter really did happen. One of the strangest things about this story is that right after the events, Boas started complaining of feeling weakness and nausea. He also suffered from headaches and lesions on the skin. Strangely, they appeared without any kind of bruising. After the farmer was examined, he found out that he had been exposed to a large dose of radiation from some unidentified source. His symptoms were those of mild radiation sickness. So whether you believe Antonio's story or not, it is still one of the most famous alien abduction cases out there. But how does science explain all these? Let's break down several explanations. Back in 1980, a researcher named Keith Basterfield suggested that some alien abduction cases might just be hallucinations. He and psychologist Dr. Robert Bartholomew even came up with the idea that people who reported abductions might be fantasy-prone, meaning they could have a hard time telling the difference between their imagination and reality. In 2011, scientists at the Phase Research Center took things a step further by using lucid dreaming to simulate alien encounters. They found that volunteers who were aware they were dreaming could actually create abduction-like experiences. In fact, 75% of the volunteers had dreams that felt just like encounters with aliens. Another explanation involves the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Many people, about 40%, experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. When this happens, they can have vivid dreams, and sometimes those dreams involve aliens. The combination of a super realistic dream and being unable to move can easily convince someone that they were abducted. Some experts think alien abductions might be linked to mental trauma. For example, D. Scott Rogo, editor of the magazine Fate, suggested that people who claim to have been abducted could be dealing with personal crises or recovering from past trauma. Such cases might also be false memories from hypnosis. Regressive hypnosis is a controversial technique used to uncover lost memories of alien abductions. While some believe it can help people recall genuine experiences, critics argue that it often leads to false memories. Hypnotists might accidentally suggest ideas during the session, leading people to believe something happened that never actually did. Studies have shown that around 50% of memories recovered through this method are likely made up. So whether it's dreams, hallucinations, or false memories, there are plenty of theories explaining why some people genuinely believe they've been abducted by aliens. 70 years ago, physicist Enrico Fermi asked a question that has puzzled scientists ever since. If life is common in the universe, why haven't we seen any evidence of it? This question is often referred to as the Fermi paradox, and it has sparked tons of theories about why extraterrestrial intelligence might exist, yet remains undetected. From the idea that humanity might be alone in the universe, to the possibility that we're simply too early or too late to find any signs of alien life. A recent study gives us a new perspective on this mystery. It's led by Robin Hanson, the creator of the Great Filter Theory, and proposes a new model to predict when we might finally encounter alien civilizations. This model suggests that we may not meet other advanced civilizations for another 200 million to 2 billion years. Let's first define the models of alien civilizations proposed by the authors. Generally speaking, we can consider two types of civilizations:
quiet and loud. Loud aliens quickly expand their sphere of influence and thus are very easy to detect. Quiet aliens are difficult to detect as they do not expand or change much before going extinct. We have little data on them. So let's take a closer look at the loud aliens. Since they should be easy to detect, we can fit theories about them into our data and say a lot about them. The authors presented a particularly simple model of loud aliens, the so-called Grabby aliens. It is a model with only 3 free parameters. Let's discuss them. Once a civilization reaches a certain level of technological development, it begins to expand rapidly, altering the space it occupies and potentially preventing other civilizations from developing in that area. This expansion could take the form of large-scale colonization, the construction of massive structures, or the production of technosignatures, signals or artifacts that would be detectable from Earth. But such rapid growth requires an incredibly high level of technology. A complex history must be between the very origin of life and such a level of development. During this period of development, fatal events may occur, which a civilization either overcomes or not. For example, it's believed that life on Earth overcame a difficult step when it learned to consume oxygen. This idea is very similar to the idea of the Great Filter, according to which there is a barrier to development that makes detectable extraterrestrial life exceedingly rare. Such fatal events are called hard steps. And a number of these steps, Encrite, is the first parameter of the model. The second parameter is based on the timeline of significant events in the evolution of life on Earth. This is the probability of the origin of life. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old, and Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago. The earliest forms of life appeared between 4.2 and 3.8 billion years ago, but humanity has only existed for the last 200,000 years, and we've only had the technology to search for extraterrestrial life for about 70 years. So it's possible that advanced civilizations could take much longer to evolve, particularly on planets orbiting stars with much longer lifespans than our sun. When a civilization becomes loud, it begins to rapidly expand its domain. To do this, it uses interstellar flights. Such flights are carried out at some average speed, which limits the speed of expansion of such civilizations. So this expansion speed is the last free parameter. By studying the world around us, the history of our civilization, and the fact that we have not yet discovered any other civilization around us, scientists can obtain approximate values of the model parameters. This means they can predict the evolution of civilizations, as well as conduct stochastic simulations. And here are the amazing results they've obtained. Grabby civilizations might appear once per million galaxies before they start expanding, which means they're incredibly rare. Their rarity also means that they could be very difficult to detect. If a civilization is expanding rapidly, the light or signals they produce might not reach us until long after they've already begun their expansion. This could explain why we haven't detected any signs of advanced alien life so far. The study's most intriguing prediction is that humanity is likely to encounter the nearest loud civilization, one that is actively expanding and altering its environment within the next 200 million to 2 billion years. Until then, the chances of detecting alien technosignatures are slim. The researchers also suggest that there may be many quiet civilizations out there, those that haven't yet reached the level of technological development needed to expand and make themselves known. These quiet civilizations could be much closer than we think, possibly even within our own galaxy. But because they haven't yet begun their expansion, they're much harder to detect. The model implies that if we want to find evidence of extraterrestrial life, we may need to look for quieter, more subtle signs rather than expecting to see grand displays of alien technology. A shocking theory claims that mysterious comet Oumuamua might be a von Neumann probe, an alien spacecraft with broken engines tumbling through our solar system. It sounds extremely unsettling, but first things first, what is a von Neumann probe? Mathematician John von Neumann suggested the concept of self-replicating spacecraft that could in some ways mimic the features of living organisms or viruses. People started to refer to such hypothetical spacecraft as von Neumann probes. Von Neumann was sure that using self-replicating spacecraft would be the most effective way to perform large-scale mining operations, like mining asteroid belts or moons. The creators of such probes could take advantage of their exponential growth. Hypothetically, a self-replicating spaceship could be sent to a neighboring planetary system and look for raw materials there. Such materials could be extracted from moons, gas giant planets, asteroids, and the likes. Using these materials, the probe could make replicas of itself. The replicas could then be sent to other planetary systems, and the original probe could pursue its main purpose within its parent star system. This pattern sure does repeat the reproduction patterns of bacteria. That's why some experts think that von Neumann machines could be considered a form of life. There's also a theory that a self-replicating spacecraft could spread throughout a galaxy the size of the Milky Way in just 500,000 years, even if it used conventional theoretical methods of interstellar travel. In other words, it wouldn't even need to employ exotic faster-than-light propulsion. In 1981, mathematical physicist and cosmologist Frank Tipler argued that extraterrestrial intelligence couldn't exist because people had never observed von Neumann probes. Even if we take a moderate rate of replication, such probes should already be common throughout space. So, it's really weird that we haven't come across any of those yet. It might only mean that extraterrestrial intelligence doesn't exist. A response to Tipler's arguments came from astronomers Carl Sagan and William Neumann. They pointed out that Tipler might have underestimated the rate of replication, and von Neumann probes should have already started consuming most of the mass in our galaxy. Therefore, any intelligent race would avoid designing von Neumann probes in the first place and try to destroy any probes as soon as they found them. Another objection to the prevalence of von Neumann probes is that civilizations that could potentially design such devices have an extremely high probability of self-destruction before producing such a machine. In any case, the assumed capacity of von Neumann probes is unlikely in reality. But then, how about Oumuamua? These days, scientists are using high-tech scanners to examine a huge, cigar-shaped comet, which might or might not be an alien probe. One idea is that it's an extraterrestrial civilization spacecraft with broken engines wandering through our solar system. If that's the case, the object could easily be a von Neumann probe. Dr. Jason Wright from Penn State University thinks that a broken alien spaceship could move in exactly the same way as Oumuamua. Rather than moving through space like other space rocks, the 1,318-foot-long, 118-foot-wide space traveler is tumbling through the solar system. At the moment, it's traveling at a speed of around 200,000 miles per hour. In his blog, Dr. Wright says that if such derelict craft were not traveling fast enough to escape the galaxy, they could thermalize with the stars and end up drifting around like an interstellar asteroid or comet. They wouldn't have attitude control anymore and would eventually start tumbling. And it could distinguish them from regular interstellar asteroids. Plus, even though their propulsion was broken, their radio transmitters could work just fine. In any case, so far, it's just a theory, and further research is needed. What do you think? Is Oumuamua just a space rock or an alien space probe?
One of the best and most convincing pieces of evidence that extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth could be the epic Nuremberg space battle of April the 4th, 1561. It was recorded either in 1561 or 1566. Different sources provide different information. All the retellings of this story focus on the woodcut picture and a vague summary of events that occurred that day. The emphasis is always on crashed spaceships and space battles. Almost everywhere you read or hear the story, it goes like this. The inhabitants of the city woke up early on an April morning and saw a staggering celestial show that looked like a real space battle. This story sounds even more convincing when you find out that some objects allegedly fought for quite a while. And some even crashed. You can see them in the lower right corner. Look at the picture once again. orbs and crosses fighting, a giant arrow, and bizarre tubes, crashing ships. Wow, that had to be a spectacular cosmic battle. To make it all more plausible, Hans Glaser, the artist behind the woodcut, was a very real person. He really did woodcuts, and this one is indeed from the time and place that it says it is, meaning it's not fake, and it does depict a real event that had its own witnesses. For all intents and purposes, it looks like very convincing proof of aliens visiting us, but don't get your hopes up. A superficial perusal of facts seems to confirm an extraterrestrial presence on our planet. But the most likely explanation is much more mundane. The Nuremberg 1561 UFO battle is just an atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog, or parhelion. A sundog is a concentrated spot of sunlight that can sometimes be seen to the right or to the left of the sun, or even on its both sides simultaneously. Sundogs often appear as a pair of patches of light with subtle colors at the same altitude over the horizon as the sun. They can have a variety of forms, from colorful spots to patches of light so intense and bright, it looks like there are two additional suns in the sky. Sundogs are weird looking enough to make it seem that something scary and otherworldly is going on in the sky. At the same time, it's just our planet's atmosphere or ice in the upper parts of the sky acting as a prism or reflective device. This prism makes the light from the sun or moon do weird things. This image can help you visualize the phenomenon. Apparently, Nuremberg had the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur. If you examine the depiction of this event and compare it with modern pictures and videos, you'll soon realize that a sundog is indeed a more likely explanation than the Galactic Empire paying us a visit. Let's find the proof of this statement in the translated description of these events and in the woodcut picture itself. First, the sun showed and was seen with two blood-colored half-round strokes, like the diminishing moon right through the sun, and in the sun, above, under, and on both sides, stood blood-colored and partly bluish, or iron-colored, also black-colored round orbs. Now here's the photo of a sundog. It has a halo surrounding it, and a red orb. And if we have at least one red orb, there could be others showing up during other events. Plus, keep in mind that sundogs are like prisms. So, depending on how light is reflected, there could be multiple colors present during such a phenomenon. Now, referring to circled plates mentioned in the description, those could be halos. For example, this sun halo looks vaguely plate-like, and it seems to be linked to other sun halos. And indeed, people have seen halos with multiple orbs. Some of the orbs could have taken a cross-like shape. If we watch some modern videos of sundogs, we might notice that the orbs on film are sun-colored. But since the Nuremberg event happened between 4 and 5 a.m., the clouds and the sun could have had reddish and orange hues. As for the fighting, it could be as simple as one shape moving a bit and changing shape along with the movements of the sun. It could have looked as if it was pushing the other shapes out of the way. Do you agree with the scientific explanation? Or do you prefer to think that Earth was visited by guests from a galaxy far, far away? Write your opinion in the comments.
70 years ago, physicist Enrico Fermi asked a question that has puzzled scientists ever since. If life is common in the universe, why haven't we seen any evidence of it? This question is often referred to as the Fermi paradox, and it has sparked tons of theories about why extraterrestrial intelligence might exist, yet remains undetected. From the idea that humanity might be alone in the universe, to the possibility that we're simply too early or too late to find any signs of alien life. A recent study gives us a new perspective on this mystery. It's led by Robin Hanson, the creator of the Great Filter Theory, and proposes a new model to predict when we might finally encounter alien civilizations. This model suggests that we may not meet other advanced civilizations for another 200 million to 2 billion years. Let's first define the models of alien civilizations proposed by the authors. Generally speaking, we can consider two types of civilizations: quiet and loud. Loud aliens quickly expand their sphere of influence and thus are very easy to detect. quiet aliens are difficult to detect as they do not expand or change much before going extinct. We have little data on them. So let's take a closer look at the loud aliens. Since they should be easy to detect, we can fit theories about them into our data and say a lot about them. The authors presented a particularly simple model of loud aliens, the so-called Grabby aliens. It is a model with only 3 free parameters. Let's discuss them. Once a civilization reaches a certain level of technological development, it begins to expand rapidly, altering the space it occupies and potentially preventing other civilizations from developing in that area. This expansion could take the form of large-scale colonization, the construction of massive structures, or the production of techno-signatures, signals or artifacts that would be detectable from Earth. But such rapid growth requires an incredibly high level of technology. A complex history must be between the very origin of life and such a level of development. During this period of development, fatal events may occur, which a civilization either overcomes or not. For example, it's believed that life on Earth overcame a difficult step when it learned to consume oxygen. This idea is very similar to the idea of the Great Filter, according to which there is a barrier to development that makes detectable extraterrestrial life exceedingly rare. Such fatal events are called hard steps. And a number of these steps, Enterprise, is the first parameter of the model. The second parameter is based on the timeline of significant events in the evolution of life on Earth. This is the probability of the origin of life. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old, and Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago. The earliest forms of life appeared between 4.2 and 3.8 billion years ago, but humanity has only existed for the last 200,000 years, and we've only had the technology to search for extraterrestrial life for about 70 years. So it's possible that advanced civilizations could take much longer to evolve, particularly on planets orbiting stars with much longer lifespans than our sun. When a civilization becomes loud, it begins to rapidly expand its domain. To do this, it uses interstellar flights. Such flights are carried out at some average speed, which limits the speed of expansion of such civilizations. So this expansion speed is the last free parameter. By studying the world around us, the history of our civilization, and the fact that we have not yet discovered any other civilization around us, scientists can obtain approximate values of the model parameters. This means they can predict the evolution of civilizations, as well as conduct stochastic simulations. And here are the amazing results they've obtained. Grabby civilizations might appear once per million galaxies before they start expanding, which means they're incredibly rare. Their rarity also means that they could be very difficult to detect. If a civilization is expanding rapidly, the light or signals they produce might not reach us until long after they've already begun their expansion. This could explain why we haven't detected any signs of advanced alien life so far. The study's most intriguing prediction is that humanity is likely to encounter the nearest loud civilization, one that is actively expanding and altering its environment within the next 200 million to 2 billion years. Until then, the chances of detecting alien techno-signatures are slim. The researchers also suggest that there may be many quiet civilizations out there, those that haven't yet reached the level of technological development needed to expand and make themselves known. These quiet civilizations could be much closer than we think, possibly even within our own galaxy. But because they haven't yet begun their expansion, they're much harder to detect. The model implies that if we want to find evidence of extraterrestrial life, we may need to look for quieter, more subtle signs rather than expecting to see grand displays of alien technology. Imagine this. Long ago, in the depths of prehistory, aliens visited Earth. Yep, that's right. According to ancient astronaut believers, intelligent extraterrestrial beings made contact with humans thousands of years ago. And not only that, those alien visitors influenced the development of our cultures, religions, technologies, and maybe even our biology. All those divine beings in many ancient religions? Well, some say they were actually aliens with fancy tech, mistaken for deities by early humans. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Easter Island statues, all alien handiwork. At least that's what they claim. Ancient astronaut believers often claim that humans are either descendants or creations of those extraterrestrials. Aliens supposedly came down from the skies and kickstarted our civilization. To back up their theories, these believers point to so-called out-of-place artifacts. They take ancient artwork, legends, or even unusual archaeological finds and say, look, that's proof of alien contact. Mainstream historians and archaeologists, of course, have different perfectly reasonable explanations for all this stuff, but ancient astronaut enthusiasts aren't convinced. Instead, they argue that gaps in our historical records and the mysteries we can't explain must be the work of extraterrestrials. So, how about we hear them out? The most famous proponent of ancient astronauts was Erich von Däniken, the author of the pseudo-scientific book, Chariots of the Gods. He popularized the theory that many ancient deities were actually aliens. He even suggested that those extraterrestrials were light-skinned and Aryan in appearance. Uh-oh. At the same time, the notion of ancient aliens didn't start with von Däniken. It traces back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Early sci-fi novels like Edison's Conquest of Mars and the works of H.P. Lovecraft first toyed with the idea. The concept took off in the 1950s, gained even more traction during the space race in the 60s, and became a worldwide phenomenon. And even though many critics discredited von Däniken's work by the 70s, his influence was strong in fringe circles. Surprisingly, scientists today agree that the idea of ancient astronauts isn't impossible, but they add that it's definitely unnecessary. The so-called mysteries of history can all be explained through science, archaeology, and good old human ingenuity. No aliens required. But ancient astronaut believers often point to religious texts, suggesting that myths about gods descending from the heavens are actually tales of aliens arriving on Earth. Take, for example, the Sumerian myth of the Anunnaki. Some people interpret it as aliens coming to our planet to mine gold and creating humans as their slaves. In Hindu mythology, there are flying vehicles called vimanas, which believers say are actually ancient spaceships. Now let's finally figure it out. Did aliens visit ancient humans? Well, some people think so, and they believe the Bible might actually have proof. For example, in the Bible's book of Genesis, there's a story about the sons of God marrying the daughters of humans. Their kids were called the Nephilim giants who roamed the planet. Some Christians think these sons of God were just different families of Adam and Eve's kids. But others, as well as ancient astronaut theorists, argue that those were actually aliens who mated with humans, creating half-human, half-alien hybrids. The King James Version of the Bible even translates Nephilim as giants. In the Book of Enoch, which adds more detail to Genesis, it says that 200 angels, known as the Watchers, came to Earth, bred with humans, and taught them all sorts of things like metallurgy, magic, and astrology. Those angels, disobeying God, were eventually locked up, and God sent a flood, aka the story of Noah's Ark, to wipe out the Nephilim and the humans who had learned forbidden knowledge. Ancient astronaut believers think that this story is about aliens who were supposed to simply observe humans but broke the rules and got involved, and their offspring are the very Nephilim half-alien giants. Some also say that modern UFOs carry those fallen angels or their descendants still roaming our planet today. Let's move on. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet described a wild vision of a huge fiery cloud with strange creatures and wheels sparkling like gems. Those beings had 4 faces, wings, and shiny bronze legs. The wheels with the help of which they moved were full of eyes and could go in any direction without turning. Sounds pretty sci-fi, huh? Ancient astronaut theorists believe Ezekiel described a spaceship, possibly piloted by extraterrestrial beings. This idea has been floating around, pun intended, since the 1950s. Some theorists also claim that the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest that held the 10 Commandments, was some kind of advanced alien technology. The same goes for other biblical objects like the Urim and Thummim used for divine communication. In the 1960s, some authors suggested that many biblical events, including miracles, were really alien tech at work. Even more shockingly, Barry Downing, a Presbyterian minister, even argued that Jesus himself was an extraterrestrial. He pointed to certain verses where Jesus said, "I am from above." The minister believed that it could have been the proof that Jesus had been an alien visitor. Some proponents also suggested that the biblical idea of hell could actually be the description of the planet Venus. The theory goes that ancient aliens might have shown early humans photos of Venus's fiery, inhospitable surface, and that inspired the idea of hell. They also claim that God and Satan were alien beings who disagreed on whether humans should be given forbidden knowledge. Others compare this to the Greek myth of Prometheus, the hero who gave humans the knowledge of fire. Some even say that the original sin in the Bible, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, was actually about alien offspring mixing with early humans. But hold on, there's even a claim that the Book of Invasions from Irish mythology, which talks about the arrival of the Tuatha De Danann, is actually about aliens arriving in Ireland. According to the legend, they came in dark clouds and caused the sun to disappear for 3 days. Ancient astronaut theorists think this could be a reference to spaceships with cloaking devices. Now, some people think that ancient artwork is full of clues that aliens visited Earth a long time ago. Let's dive deeper into the details. Ancient astronaut believers point to cave drawings, especially those from the Hopi and Zuni tribes, that show Kachina's certain spirit beings and say they might actually represent star people, which means extraterrestrials. They argue that similar drawings found around the world are proof that aliens visited many different ancient civilizations. There are also examples from places like Australia and Italy, drawings there look a lot like astronauts with dome-shaped helmets. Some people think those cave pictures show early humans encountering aliens wearing spacesuits. Another source of potential evidence comes from medieval and Renaissance paintings. Ancient astronaut fans claim that many artworks from this time show UFOs. For instance, in Madonna and Child with the Infant St. John, there's an odd object in the sky that people say looks like a flying saucer. You'll find more in other famous paintings like The Annunciation by Carlo Crivelli, Holy Trinity by Bonaventura Salimbeni, and Miracle of the Snow by Masolino da Panicale. However, experts like Italian art historian Diego Cuoghi argue that these objects aren't UFOs whatsoever. They symbolize religious ideas like angels, radiant clouds, and others. One of the most popular ancient astronaut claims is based on the Nazca lines in Peru. These huge ground drawings, depicting animals and geometric shapes, can only be fully seen from high above. Some think they were created according to instructions from aliens, or that the long lines might even have been runways for their spaceships. At the same time, archaeologists say there's no proof of this. They think the lines were actually used for ancient ceremonial purposes. One researcher even recreated a figure using just simple tools to show how they could have been made by the Nazca people themselves. But wait, there's more to consider. Some artifacts like the Saqqara bird from Egypt and the Quimbaya artifacts from Colombia, Ecuador, are said to look like modern planes or gliders. Ancient astronaut believers think these might have been models of alien spacecraft, even though mainstream archaeologists are sure that they're just stylized representations of birds and insects. Then how about sites like the Pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu in Peru, Baalbek in Lebanon, Stonehenge in England, and the Moai statues on Easter Island? They often get linked to the idea of aliens. These structures are so massive and precisely built that humans of the time couldn't have made them without help from extraterrestrials. Mainstream archaeologists don't agree and say ancient people had the skills and manpower to move even huge stones. There have been experiments showing that large megaliths can be transported using simple ancient technologies. And still, some believers argue that the sudden rise of ancient Egypt's advanced civilization, and especially the construction of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was due to extraterrestrial influence. Now look at these massive Moai statues on Easter Island. They have puzzled people for a long time. Some ancient astronaut believers say there's no way humans could have moved such heavy structures without using alien technology. But in the 1980s, a group of researchers figured out a method that involved using ropes that made the statues walk across the landscape with the help of just a small team of people. But how will you explain this fact? Some ancient cultures, including the Egyptians and some Native Americans, used to artificially lengthen the skulls of their children. Ancient astronaut believers think they did this to mimic the appearance of extraterrestrials, whom that they might have seen as deities. Pharaoh Akhenaten and his family, who are often depicted with elongated heads and other unusual features, have also sparked theories of alien influence. Scientists believe that such features were probably caused by a genetic disorder due to inbreeding, which was common in royal families. Akhenaten was known for worshipping the sun god Aten, and some suggest his focus on the sun could be tied to a disease that sunlight helped relieve. Now let's get one thing straight. Mainstream scientists and archaeologists are not buying ancient astronaut theories. They call this whole thing pseudoscience, arguing that such wild claims often twist, misinterpret, or even outright fake evidence. The Pentagon has recently released a report, and according to the New York Times, they haven't found any evidence of aliens, spaceships, or visits from extraterrestrials. Last summer, a former U.S. intelligence officer named David Grush claimed at a congressional hearing that the U.S. might have been hiding secret programs for decades to detect and study aliens and their tech. He even said the U.S. had pieces of alien spaceships and even actual alien remains. However, the 63-page report put together by the U.S. Department of Defense's Anomaly Resolution Office says that since the 1960s, people have been confusing American spy planes and drones with UFOs, or what they now call unidentified anomalous phenomena. Pentagon spokesperson Patrick Ryder said they were keeping an open mind, but found no proof of aliens or hidden government programs. He mentioned that most sightings were just normal objects or misidentifications. In February last year, after a few unidentified flying objects were shot down over the US and Canada, an interagency group was created to look into the whole UFO situation. At the time, John Kirby from the National Security Council noted that this phenomenon had been around for a long time, but previous administrations hadn't really tried to explain it. Now, why is the ancient astronaut theory so popular? The human brain needs an easy way to explain incomprehensible things, and blaming them on some extraterrestrial powers is a simple way to do it. The supporters of the theory often take fragments out of historical and cultural contexts, ignoring the broader meaning of those pieces. Plus, they assume that alien technologies must be similar to ours, and that aliens must be interested in the same things as humans, which would be very unlikely even if aliens existed. The ancient astronaut theory, despite its popularity in certain circles, is classified by the scientific community as pseudoscience since it does not comply with the principles of the scientific method and is often based on distortion of facts or false analogies. At the same time, come to think of it, the universe is unimaginably huge. Does it really sound possible that in the vast, constantly expanding cosmos, we're the only intelligent, technologically advanced civilization? What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments.
Hi everyone. Today we'll be talking about the controversial music that astronauts once heard in space. A few years ago, NASA made public the recording of a bizarre music that the astronomers from Apollo 10 reported hearing in May 1969, while they were flying over the far side of the moon. At that moment, they were out of radio contact with Earth. This happened months before the first astronaut set foot on the lunar surface. There were 3 people on board: Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan. The sounds lasted for about an hour. Astronomers managed to record them and transmit them to Mission Control in Houston. Now, I want you to listen to these whistling sounds.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? You hear that? That whistling sound? Woo!
Don't they resemble some kind of otherworldly outer space music? So the question is, could the astronauts have heard alien music coming from outer space? Well, there's another more simple, non-alien involving explanation for this cosmic phenomenon, but we'll talk about it a bit later. In the audio recording from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Eugene Cernan, who was piloting the lunar module, could be heard asking John Young, piloting the command module, if he could hear that whistling sound. Cernan was the first one to call these sounds music and to add that they were kinda outer spacey. Later, when the 2 astronauts asked Tom Stafford, who was in the lunar module with Cernan, if he could hear the sounds too, he confirmed it and stated that they were really weird. Young suggested they should find out more about them. Nobody will believe us, he added. Apollo 10 was a mission that paved the way for Apollo 11, which landed 2 humans on the lunar surface. The Apollo 10 astronauts flew to the moon in a command module. However, 2 of the crew members also had a ride in the lunar module, which allowed them to drop down to less than 10 miles above the moon's surface. So, since they managed to approach our natural satellite so closely, could they have heard something coming from the lunar surface? Well, apparently not. Turns out that the creepy whistling sound was nothing more than some interference between the VHF radios on the 2 different vehicles. Interestingly enough, Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins later wrote in his book, Carrying the Fire, that NASA technicians had warned him about the whistling. He also mentioned that if he hadn't known about the origins of this music, it would have scared him to no end. In 2008, NASA shared the transcripts of the Apollo 10 transmission, but according to the documents themselves, they were declassified in 1982. In 2012, NASA also shared the audio files online. If you listen to these files, you'll hear that the astronauts sound sincerely awed and puzzled by what they hear. Moreover, they bring it up over and over again. It's also worth mentioning that you never actually feel that the three men were panicked or alarmed while going over the transcript or the audio. Some sources put particular emphasis on the fact that the space music started when the astronauts were over the far side of the moon. They didn't have radio or visual contact with mission control for about an hour, something that had been expected. Some documentaries used this moment to create tension by saying things like, the astronauts were on their own. No one on Earth could see or hear them. However, the narrators never explained why the astronauts' isolation could have been such a significant factor. By no means was it connected to the not-so-mysterious sounds undersold. There's another interesting element to this story that we should consider though, and it's the fact that Apollo 10 astronauts never discussed this incident and the sounds publicly. However, it's still unclear whether they talked about it with NASA engineers. This makes some people speculate that the astronauts didn't want to project anything but a rock-hard psyche. Showing a drop of confidence even once during the whole mission could have left them out of the whole project.